Hello, welcome back to From the Horse's Mouth, the official podcast of the South African Equestrian Federation. And today we're shining a spotlight on EQASA, the Equine Qualifications Authority of South Africa, and the vital role they play in shaping standards, education, and professionalism across our industry in South Africa. From rider and coach development to groom education and career pathways, EQASA sits at the heart of building a stronger, more sustainable equestrian community. So joining us today to unpack their impacts, opportunities, and what this means for you on the ground is Troy Kernick, the Managing Director of EQASA. Troy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, Georgie. Lovely to be here.
And Troy, for those who are unfamiliar and hearing the term EQASA for the first time, can you tell us what EQASA is and why it was created?
Yes, absolutely. Well, we've got a 50-year history. This year is actually our 50th year of existence. So it all started in 1976 with Charlotte Stubbs. Some of you will recall her. She was an amazing equestrian, and she started the whole ball rolling because they realized that it was quite important for the horse world to have qualified instructors, because anybody could just set up and have a riding school, and they just felt that they needed to have standards and then some pathway that people could become qualified. So that all started in 1976, and then Di Peterser joined her in the early 2000s. That's when Di took over from Charlotte, and then Di was very involved with the whole procedure, and she changed everything from just being that hectic, you had to get to your qualification, your exams, and do 12 exams in one day, which was pretty hectic. Anyway, she changed it because she felt for South Africa, it was important to have it in a graduated way. So starting with the modules and starting with the basics and then building up from there. And that would enable everybody to stop at any point. If you felt you didn't want to go all the way and become an instructor, but you did want to increase your knowledge of horses, then you could stop. You could stop at module 1, module 2, but you would have a certificate. So that's how it all came to be.
And how has EQASA evolved? I believe it was originally the SANEF National Instructors Plan. And would that have been when they were doing the 12 exams in one day, and then it evolved onto EQASA? Okay.
Correct. That's exactly what happened.
Okay. And what gap in the South African equine industry is EQASA filling?
So I think the most important thing, and I think this has become a buzzword throughout the world, is the social license to operate. And that is utilizing horses for sport, for recreation, because they don't really have a choice. We decide we're going to take them and ride them, and we're going to make them jump over jumps and that kind of thing. So there's a huge groundswell of opinion overseas, more than here, and it's really the buzzword at the moment, and that is the social license. So we need to have a situation where everybody in the horse world is really au fait with how to look after horses, their welfare, their psychological well-being, all of that kind of thing. So that's why it started, and that's why there's often a gap between knowledge of the horse and just being able to ride. There is a gap.
What does education before participation mean in a practical sense?
Absolutely. So in other words, before you can go along to a show and become really competitive, it's important to understand your horse, important to know what's good for them, what's not good for them, how they think. We all know the horses are flight animals, and we need to understand that. And you've seen that pile of rocks from miles away, whereas the horse, he's been looking there in the distance. He's not seen that pile of rocks until you get almost on top of it. And then he spins and runs away. And you're thinking, but it's been there all the time. But that's not how he sees it. So it's so important for us to understand horses and then go from there.
I think, and everyone wants to go to a show. You know, there was a T-shirt that someone had on at Easter Festival that said, what are the 10 best things to do with a horse? And it said 1 ride, 2 ride, 3 ride, 4 ride, 5 ride, 6 ride. You know, so we all have these horses because we want to ride them. but their husbandry and as you say, an understanding is so critical. How does EQUASA fit into the broader equestrian ecosystem in South Africa? Carrying on from there.
So we're not just in the sport. It's everywhere. There are something like 330,000 horses in South Africa. And if you think about it, how many of those are actually registered to be involved in sport? Okay, there are a lot of race horses, there are a lot of show jumpers and all that kind of sport, polo ponies, etc. But most of them are actually in the rural areas, and they're utilized for other pursuits, not just the sport. And that's why it's so important for us to integrate everybody and all the sports, including racing, everything.
Why is it important for EQUASA to sit under or alongside the SAEF structure? I see there's a big coming together and a holding hands between EQUASA and the South African Equestrian Federation. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So the reason why it's independent is because, as I mentioned just now, it's not just the sport, it's horses all over. So that's why we're independent, but we work alongside SAEF. And it's so wonderful that we are working together now because, to bring in everybody on the same page is just so important because we're all here for the horse. And that's the bottom line.
So it's not just, you're not just focusing on instructors as much as this was originally the instructors' plans. And I really want to stress that. It's for anybody who wants to be involved, who wants to get to know more about horses. It's a very accessible education.
100%, Georgie. That's exactly the idea, is so that everybody can start and get some sort of certification. You don't have to become an instructor, but at least you have that knowledge of the horse. And that's that whole thing about education before participation. It's so important. And you know that South Africa is very much at the forefront of that. I deal a lot with the IGEQ, and
just tell us about the IGEQ again for people who don't know.
Okay, sorry. The IGEQ stands for the International Group for Equestrian Qualifications. So this group came into being some 30 odd years ago, and it was a whole lot of countries where people would move from one country to another, and they'd qualify in one country and then go and work in another country. And there just needed to be parity. So each member country knows that if somebody qualified in South Africa, they can happily go and work in the UK or Australia, and their levels would be the same. There's a minimum standard that you have to achieve, and then you have your little passport, your little equestrian passport, and when you apply for your job, they know and they're happy that you've been assessed in the right way, so they know what level you're at.
That's great. So following on from South African Equestrian Federation is obviously our national federation. How does EQUASA interact with the disciplines and other governing bodies?
Okay, so there was a time when there was what they call the SGB, the Standards Generating Body, and they approached all the different disciplines and said, what would you like to have in the qualification? What would you like to cover? And they then put everything forward, and then that's how we figured out what was needed for that particular situation. So that's how we work with them. But also the disciplines are really fantastic. They're coming to the party. Show jumping organized for Sam York to come out. So she's a fantastic technical person. She's actually the technical director of the IGEQ. And we've had her out here quite a few times just to make sure that our international level 3 is on a par with that overseas.
That's great. So it's really, like you said, there's a minimum standard and we're meeting it. And especially in a climate, I think, where people want to go and maybe work overseas for a gap year, that's a really, really great thing to have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Then each country knows exactly where you stand.
What is the relationship then between EQUASA and CEEPSA and SAQA?
Okay, so EQASA is basically the assessment body. So we do the actual assessments. We have a memorandum of understanding with CEEPSA. CEEPSA is registered with SAQA.
And can you tell us who CEEPSA and SAQA are?
CEEPSA stands for the Council for Equine and Equestrian Professionals of Southern Africa. So that covers everything. It's not just our fields, but fields like the farrier. He can become a member of CEEPSA. Anyone to do with any equine practice can become a member of CEEPSA. It's not just what we do.
And is the idea ultimately that CEEPSA, because they fall under SAQA, which is the National Qualifications Authority, the idea is that if you are getting a professional who is CEEPSA affiliated, that you know that they meet a certain standard of qualification?
Yes. So it's like a triangle. That's kind of how it works. But our brief as EQASA is to do the assessments.
Oh, okay, fantastic. And how does EQASA align in with national frameworks like the I learned a lot of acronyms, and I remember dying to call it alphabet soup, because then I found out about the QCTO.
Okay, so the QCTO stands for the Qualifications Council of Trade and Occupations. That's it. It was a huge learning curve when I had to take over because, Di unfortunately passed away totally unexpectedly. So I took over and wow, talk about a huge learning curve.
Baptism by fire.
Wow, these acronyms, it's like learning a new language. Anything to do with government departments is these acronyms, as you said, alphabet soup. And having to learn them is you have to keep going, okay, what does this stand for again? And then work it out. Wow. Yeah, it has been quite a journey.
So how does EQASA align with all of these? Is this your job, is to make sure that our standards are in alignment with their purpose?
So what we do is we are another acronym, AQP, Assessment Quality Partner for the QCTO. Okay. So they're obviously not going to do the assessments because that's not their brief. So we've got an SLA, we've signed an agreement, service level agreement with the QCTO, and we are the ones who will perform all these jobs with the assessment. So that's kind of how it works.
So in other words, from what I'm understanding, people will go to an EQASA approved, or they can approach you directly and just skip the learning part if they feel that they're capable and write the exams with you, which would then allow them to be qualified. Or you do have places that you recommend that people would go to learn. They would go and study and prepare for their module 1, their module 2, which then falls under level 1, and then their next modules, and that's how they would proceed through it. You don't necessarily control the coaching or the teaching.
No. So that is the thing. We are not a training provider. So our brief is to be independent and we do the assessments. So we don't want to be too close to the training providers because it can be seen as being preferred one as opposed to the other. Mm. So the training providers are very important. They play a huge role. And in an ideal world, we'd love everybody to go along to the training providers and spend time with them. The reason why we don't absolutely insist on it is because it can be a barrier to learning. So in other words, if you...
And the travel perspective, okay.
Precisely. I mean, you might live in Katu and there's nobody there that you can go to, for example. I'm just putting an example out. So that's why it's you either do it self-study if you feel confident and you with your horses all the time and you're quite good with reading up and learning and practicing and all that kind of thing. That's great. If you're not, then maybe it's better to align yourself with a training provider or somebody who is qualified and do it the correct way so that you know that you're doing it as is expected in terms of safety and all that kind of thing.
And how important is it for people, for EQASA to be aligned with all of these bodies like the IGEQ?
Absolutely essential. The IGEQ is very closely, we are very closely aligned to them because it gives you that international exposure. And also there's always new things coming out. new ideas,
Yes.
new in terms of how do we deal with horses. I'm sure you will see a lot in terms of, well, yes, the horse's welfare is okay, but how is he psychologically in terms of what we're doing with him, how long we're keeping him in his stable, all of that kind of thing, particularly when it comes to competition. So there again, it's so important for us to align ourselves very closely with the IGEQ so that we get all this information. Also, every year, the IGEQ has a conference in a different country, and it always used to be Prerequisites and myself, and last year it was actually me and Kim Hughes who went to France. And there are always discussions amongst all the different countries, as well as standard alignment. So we make sure that what we're seeing in they will have a lesson, for example, and then we discuss between ourselves, everybody there, would we agree that that is a level 1 lesson or is it a level 2 lesson? So we make sure we're seeing the same things.
That's great.
And that's where it's so important.
Okay. Can you break down the EQASA qualification pathway for us and its different levels?
Sure. Okay. So first of all, you start with level 1, obviously, and that is kind of aimed at the person who's a professional groom. So, and just because you're jumping 130 doesn't mean that you don't need to know about being a groom. One day your groom might be sick and you'll have to do it all. So that's why that is the basis. So for your module 1, you will do things like tack up, put a bridle together, groom the horse correctly, know about a quick release knot. You would do basic stable management, putting on boots, putting on blankets, equine physiology, but at a basic level that our grooms do all the time. They are fabulous. So they know these things, and how lovely if they get the opportunity to come and do the exams.
So
and
I just want to pause you there because we also have a podcast that I would encourage people to look up, and it is the SAEF Development Grooms courses, which we interviewed Renee Erasmus about that. And these courses, the grooms courses, are free to grooms. So I would really encourage anybody who's interested in that to reach out to SAEF and get your groom onto a qualification pathway. I love what you're saying, Troy, because Renee said that ultimately we do want to keep them inspired and motivated and get them into a proper qualification pathway. And yes, your professional grooms should be able to do a module 1 and 2.
Absolutely. I'm delighted to hear you say that, because that is exactly what we want. Even my jockeys at the South African Equestrian Federation, they all have to do module 1 and 2. So even though they're becoming jockeys and that it's really going to be grooms, they still need to know about the horse. So that's why we start at the basics, and then for module 2 is your professional head groom, we call it. So that's similar subjects but more. And we included this level of lunging. Okay. So it's lots of hands-on, but lunging, not hectic lunging, just lunging for exercise, as one would often do in a stable yard. So again, just making sure that everything is correct, everything is safe.
Safety is a really pertinent topic. As much as we're talking about horse welfare, I think businesses need to be, and stable yards and private employers need to be very aware of the safety risks that they run having undereducated staff who potentially get hurt by horses, which, let's be honest, and we've all had our share of broken toes and, smashed faces. So really safety first for horse, but also for the handler. I think that's a great point.
Absolutely. Safety all the way. So, and that's one of the things for the exams, all the candidates, when they're going into the stable with a horse, they have to be wearing a helmet of some kind from a safety perspective, as well as boots. Obviously, your riding attire is ideal, but those are prerequisites when you're dealing with a horse that you don't know. We all know, as you say, we've all had broken toes and broken bones. They're so unpredictable. Got to love them. Then the next level is the level 3, module 3, which is more your management side. So this requires quite a lot of learning. So a lot of people will back off from this because it does require quite a bit of studying. You do all sorts of things like feeding horses. Again, this is something one would do in an environment, stable yard environment anyway, but it's just having a bit of understanding of the feed and how to feed certain horses, what types of feed would it react on certain types of horses, if they're laminitic, if they're colicky horses, different rules of feeding, all of that kind of thing. As well as there's one section which is it's called Yard Management 3. So you're building on your 1 and your 2, and now it's 3. But this is more like business. So this is how would you run a stable yard as a business? This is where we bring in things like social license to operate, which I mentioned earlier is such a buzzword at the moment. So we start to bring in things like that. So the person at this level has to think a little bit more about how they would make the environment.
And I just want to, I heard such a great thing the other day that said horse businesses don't fail because people know nothing about horses. It's because they know nothing about business. And that really, that for me, I think that's a great inclusion in the EQASA certification program because, yeah, we love horses. We all hate horse people are the worst administrators I've ever met in my life. So I honestly think that is a wonderful inclusion.
Yes, absolutely. No, it is. It's so important, and it's such a lovely. It's a lovely topic because one can add in so much there, and you can ask the candidate, for example. So how would you look after the horses, and what do you keep? What sort of admin structures do you have in terms of their farrier, their inoculations, all of that kind of thing? Again, record keeping, and trying to get them into the sort of way of doing that and making sure that they always keep an incident register, because you might not be here next week and the horse did something strange one week, which didn't turn into anything, but then it did it again.
Yes.
So all of those kind of things come into this. The other thing that one has to do at module 3 is to do a first aid certificate.
Okay.
You need to do, and it needs to be a serious one, like a 2-day one, because as we know, and as you've referred to, horses are particularly dangerous. Anything can go wrong to you, your staff, the people visiting, all that. So that's why.
And again, I really would encourage, because we've had this conversation with Renee about the grooms, the amount of people who are riding at home and there's nobody else at home with them other than their groom, and then they have a fall. I think it's really, really valuable for people to consider having their groom first aid certified. But I digress. Okay, so that is level 3 and 4.
That's module 3. Yes, module 3. Right. And then so now you've gone from module 1 to module 3, and it's only been about the horse and the horse's care. Nothing to do with teaching or riding or anything like that. So this is your education before participation or even getting onto the horse's back. Okay. So once you've done that, you can stop at this point if you're not going to want to carry on.
If you're a stable manager or, okay.
Correct, 100%. Then the next level is module 4. So module 4 is something we introduced as your pre-international level. So module 4 is where what you're aiming at is the person who's teaching at a riding school, for example.
Okay.
But it's a lovely way to get you used to the idea of what to expect at module 5. So you will ride. You have to show that you can ride, jump small jumps and a little gymnastic. And most important thing is for you to have a discussion with the examiner as to how you felt the horse went and how you would improve him. Nice. So even if you're not a super fantastic rider, but you can ride and you've got a good feel, that's great. That's almost more important than your actual riding, is your ability to discuss.
And to transcend. I think it's the great coaches in the world are not always the great riders.
Quite right. Because so often for them, they have this innate talent and
communication, and
you just got it, or you don't, or you haven't got it. And for those who've got it, they can be great coaches for other people who've also got it. But for the mere mortals like myself, it's much nicer to have somebody who also struggles a little bit. And then it's so much easier to be able to discuss that and explain how to develop and that. So the other thing that at Module 4 is to do a group lesson. Okay. Now, as you know, a one-on-one is actually quite easy compared to
a group lesson is like herding cats.
Correct. When you've got 4 little cherubs in the arena and they're all doing their own thing.
I hope you go and you give, do they give the children an espresso and a lollipop before they do the lesson, the group lesson? I think that's, you need to make it more exciting, Troy.
No, we've got to be fair. We've got to be fair to the candidates. Okay. So yes. So then they get an opportunity to show what they can do with a group. And it's a lovely way to get used to the whole idea of Module 5. So at Module 4, the input from your examiner is quite important, because this will tell you whether, yes, you're on the right track, or careful. For example, if you go along to one of your riders and hold their leg and say, I'm just going to put it in the position that I want it. Not allowed. Not allowed. In terms of safeguarding these days, you have to go to the rider and say, may I show you how I want your leg to be? It's one of those things that in the past, we just did it.
Yes.
And now it's not allowed. So now we have to actually ask permission. So those are new things that one introduces. They also do a written exam. They have to have, obviously, their first aid certificate still needs to be current. They need to go and get a police clearance. That's another thing that's introduced at Module 4. Plus, they have to have logged hours, 40 hours of teaching.
And they get a logbook and they have to fill that out.
There is a log sheet which they can download and they can fill it out. This is all part of that record keeping. Okay. And then in an ideal world, they would be teaching under a qualified person who will then sign them off.
Oh, great. Okay.
So at least you know that you are teaching in the right way. And having a qualified person there as well can also say, okay, I'm seeing this, yes, really good there, but what about introducing something different in your teaching, or your way of teaching, or the way you stand in the arena, for example, not just in the middle like it always used to be. You've maybe got to stand outside sometimes so you can see both sides of the rider and the horse. So that's your Module 4. Okay. Right, then you move on to Module 5, which is the one you're aiming for, and this is the international level 1. Okay. So at this level, it's similar to Module 4, but just at a higher level. You will be teaching pupils who are more competent and maybe jumping a bit bigger. You also have to teach a flat work lesson at novice level, novice dressage level. So things like shoulder ins, leg yields, that kind of thing. You also will ride, again, you ride your own horse over fences, and you will ride an unknown horse on the flat. Okay. So in doing that, you have been seen on at least 2 different horses. So it just shows you that you are a competent rider. That's not just your one horse who's lovely and push button and you look gorgeous. Now you're riding different horses. So just testing your riding ability as a rider. So by the time you get to this stage, and again, going back to the logs, you would have to add in more logs, more hours. Okay. So and again, signed off by a qualified instructor who'd be happy to, support you. And at this stage, by now, Georgie, you will have been assessed on 29 occasions.
Sure.
So in various, from Module 1 to Module 5, 29 occasions.
Okay.
And not just by the same person, because what happens at an exam is you have 5 different examiners. So in your Module 1, you've got 5 subjects, usually 5 different examiners. Okay. Module 2, 6 subjects, 6 different examiners.
And are your examiners people who've completed this qualifications pathway? Great.
Yes, or they are industry experts.
Okay.
So, for example, I've got somebody who's done her module 3, but she also has an MBA. So I grab her to come and examine the business paper.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
Or you get the farrier to come and examine the hoof care at module 3.
Lovely.
That's yeah.
Great.
So mostly they have been through the whole system, but you do have industry experts as well.
Yeah. Okay. So that's level module 5.
Module 5.
Oh, so that is your international instructor level 1.
Correct.
Okay. And then module 6?
So module 6 is just more, and at module 6 you can say, okay, I'm in the jumping sphere, or you can say I'm in the dressage sphere. So you will then get your qualification, but it's written under the jumping or specialization, correct? So you can specialize as a jumping coach, or a dressage coach, or both, because absolutely fine.
As well.
Inventing, absolutely. So that's how it works. But you can specialize at module 6, and then you'll have to write papers and teach and same sort of thing.
Okay.
What else is there in that? It's just a kind of a next level from level 1, that you will jump at a higher level, you will coach at a higher level, that sort of thing. When it comes to the next level, level 3, that's the highest level that we offer.
Okay.
And for that, I insist that we have an external examiner.
Like a Sam
York. Like Sam.
Okay.
Sam York has been out a few times, and that's why we've been able to have this level. Okay. Because I think it's important that we have parity throughout the world.
And I think it adds provenance to the qualification.
Absolutely. And also, for her, she doesn't know you. She doesn't know that you're a well-known personality. She's coming with a completely blank slate, but because she's examining this level all the time, she knows what she needs. She knows what she's looking for.
That's great.
So that's why that's an important.
So what do people gain at each stage of qualification, besides wonderful knowledge?
Okay, yes, obviously the wonderful knowledge, and I have in fact got people who could actually have got their recognition of prior learning because they've done it all. I said, come on, do the whole thing. And they've said to me afterwards, I learned so much. I've had horses for 20 years. I have looked after them for 20 years. I've ridden at top level. But she says, going through this process, I've learned so much. And that was really gratifying to hear. Okay, so what do you get? At those first 4 levels, you get a certificate. At module 5, you obviously get your certificate, but you also get, you qualify to apply for an international equestrian passport. So that's what you get.
That's your IGEQ. And then you say that means that you are legitimate, qualified, because I know that other countries are a lot strict. Well, it's more moderated, let's put it that way, not necessarily stricter. But you can't get a coaching job in the United Kingdom or in Australia without a formalized coaching qualification, no matter who you are.
Absolutely. And I often get people from saying, okay, they're qualified in such and such. So I just get onto the person who's involved in that country and with the IGEQ, and I say, do you know this person, or is this person qualified? And they come straight back to me and say, yes, no problem. And so we've got that parity and that interaction. Yes. With people around the world, which is so
relationships.
Lovely. Yes.
So on that, sorry, and before I actually go on to this, you've skipped ahead to one of my following questions. You mentioned RPL, recognized prior learning. Yes. So obviously there are a bunch of coaches, and it's I know you did almost an amnesty of sorts, I think about 10 years ago, and said, we want everyone to be part of the standardization. What about coaches who are around, or maybe they've coached overseas and they've moved here and they're not part of a formalized system? Is there an opportunity for them to RPL still with EQASA? So RPL, the recognized prior learning, means that you tell people.
Yes, so it is still possible. While I encourage people to actually do the whole thing, because then nothing's been left out. That's always the worry when you do RPL, because you're not 100% sure. So what we do is that they supply a CV, and obviously there must be there's an age limit. Lower, younger than 40, no, they must actually do the system. If they're over 40, they've taught at a high level, they've ridden themselves at a high level, then they supply a CV. Then the CV will go to the RPL committee. So this is people who are high up in the industry, not necessarily part of EQASA. They obviously they would be qualified, but the CVs go to them, and they would say, yes, we agree, or we think this might be missing. And then they do challenge exams. So they don't just get it handed to them. They have to do challenge exams, particularly in areas where we think they might be lacking. So, for example, if they're a top show jumper, but maybe they haven't taught any dressage. So then one of their challenge exams will be a flat work lesson.
Okay.
So they would have to do that, the equivalent of what you would do at level 1, so module 5. And then they all would have to do quite a tricky RPL written paper, which is, it's difficult. But because they're telling us that they know it all, they've got to prove it by writing this paper.
Okay. And moving on, how does EQASA compare to international systems like the BHS, the British Horse Society?
Yes, absolutely. So BHS also is a member of the IGEQ. So where they slot into the different levels in IGEQ, we do the same.
Okay.
So if you have your level 2 from South Africa, for example, you can go over to the UK and they recognize it straight away.
Okay.
And similarly, the other way around.
Okay, if anyone wants to come here. So, and then what is required practically for people to qualify? Experience, exams, prerequisites. What can somebody who wants to embark on this journey need to have their head wrapped around?
Okay, so you're saying from the start. Yeah. Okay, so what I would say to them is learn as much as you can. Go and sit with somebody who's a top instructor. Go to any seminar that's happening. Read up. Make sure that you cover as much as you can, because you learn something from every single time you go out there. Every day that you sit and you watch a lesson, you will learn something. I learned something this morning. I didn't know that there was what's called a war bridle. And a war bridle is a bridle-less bit. Who knew?
It's real dire times if you're having to use that. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So yes. So I would say to them, just go and learn and sit and be with somebody, not just one person. Try and go to a lot of different people so that you get ideas and you get feelings and you're learning all the time. So that would be my basis. I would say start there and then start your theory learning as well. Make sure that you get your books that are recommended on the EQASA, the list.
Where can they find the recommended reading list? On the EQASA website?
Yes, it's on the EQASA website. You just have to look.
And I just want to be clear, the EQASA website is actually SANEP, SANIP.org.za. Is that correct?
Yes, but normally when you can Google EQASA as well, and then it takes you there.
Okay. No, but people mustn't be alarmed if they land there. They are on the.
No, that is the one. That is the one. Stands for South African National Instructors Plan. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay. 100%.
So I know we briefly touched on this earlier on, but just from a quality control perspective, who are the assessors for the EQASA qualifications?
Okay. So what we do is we will take people who are qualified. So they've been through the system themselves. They are qualified. They're at module 5, 6, 7, whatever. And then most of them will have done an assessor course. We've been quite
so there's a separate course. You're not just...
okay. as an assessor, it's not necessarily a horse assessor or horse qualification assessor. It's a general assessor course. So a lot of my examiners have done that in the last couple of years. We've really made a point of doing that, something that we've always wanted to do, but because there's always been a bit of a cost involved, it's been like 1 or 2 people do it, but now we've actually had about 20 do it, which is fabulous. So they've done that. We encourage them. When Sam York came out, she does examiner training, and we get them to come to that. We also do informal examiner training when there's maybe before an exam or after an exam, and we sit together with our examiners and say, look, were there any areas where you felt that there was a problem? And then we can pass that on to the training providers. We can discuss how we're going to examine things. So there's quite a lot involved. It's not just, okay, you come and examine.
Okay.
And ideally, we need people who are regular examiners, because they will keep up to date with the new papers, new ideas, things that are coming through from overseas. That's kind of how we do it.
So IGEQ is ensuring consistency at the training and standardization by ensuring that you're using people who have a certain level of qualification and they've done this assessor course. So know you're being assessed. Okay, fantastic. And then how do you carrying that forward? How do you ensure that consistency across provinces and assessment centers?
Yes, so
based in KwaZulu-Natal. I know Kim's based in Joburg.
Yes, and then we have Sharon down Western Cape. Yeah, look, it is. I mean, obviously there's like, for example, Kim's exams are huge, whereas we've got our Eastern Cape. They'll have maybe 10 people, which is marvelous. We've got that going. It wasn't for a long time, it was dormant, and now it's got going again, which is really, really gratifying. So to keep the consistency, obviously, in terms of the equipment, there's a list of equipment that everybody has to have, and similar sort of bits and bridles and saddles and that kind of thing. So the equipment all needs to be the same. And for the lunging, for example, there are a gazillion different degogs and chambons and side reins and all those aids that you can use. But we just use the chambon and the side reins. So those are the only two. And throughout the country, we do the same. So they'll have similar papers. There are obviously 2 or 3 papers, and depending on which exam it is, they'll use one of those 3 papers. Papers do change from time to time. They evolve and maybe bring in a few more questions, change the question slightly. So we try and keep that consistency. And with the whole interacting with our examiners, make sure that there is consistency. Then also afterwards, we moderate. So when all the papers come through, they are seen by a couple of people and moderators, just to make sure that, there's not a situation, although it can happen, where there's a really lot of weak candidates and then a lot more failures. And the next time there might be a fabulous cohort and they all pass 90%. So it does happen. But if there's a situation where maybe in one subject they all fell down, then one looks at that and you discuss it with the examiners and say, look, to moderate it, can we talk about this? Where did you have the problems? And then we decide whether it's worth increasing their marks by a couple of percent. The same sort of thing that happens at schools when they moderate the whole examination.
So you've mentioned moderation. What other safeguards are in place to ensure you maintain credibility and fairness in these examinations?
Oh, yes. Okay, so all the examiners have to sign a code of conduct in terms of what they do. And also if there is, so say, for example, you have been preparing somebody for an exam, then you mustn't examine that person. It should be examined by somebody else. So there's no sort of bias or, conflict of interest.
Yes. Okay. Does IGEQ also accredit training providers?
So we don't actually accredit them.
Okay.
We support them. We love it. We love anything to do with learning is fully supported by us. But we're not aligned with anybody in particular.
Okay.
They are independent. We're independent of them. So although we recommend and say, please, get yourselves, make sure that you've got qualified people and that your learning material is current. Aside from that, they are independent people and we are independent of them.
And how can anyone wanting to embark on their EQASA qualification process ensure that their training provider is of a respectable standard? What are there anything, like what are the red flags and the green flags?
Yeah, so they need to do their homework. They need to just make sure that they must go and visit a few people and decide, okay, this would suit me better than that. Ask other people in the industry who are, people who are respected. That's really how one would do it.
Okay.
We can't really be the long arm of the law.
I suppose it's the same as government with matric qualifications. There's people have to choose a school that's right for them and for their child at the end of the day.
Yeah.
How do EQASA qualifications translate into real employment opportunities in the industry?
So I think anybody who's got some sort of certification and they take that along when they're applying for a job are obviously going to stand head and shoulders above someone who's not. So I often have people coming to me, when I say people, I mean people who've got riding schools, and they say, do you have anybody who's perhaps doing their modules and would like to come and have work experience? And that's fabulous because they're looking for people who are wanting to improve themselves, and they're obviously those sort of people that want to do it correctly. So I've had that. Yes, sorry.
So I was going to say, how do employers such as yards and studs, tack shops, riding schools, how do they view EQASA-certified candidates?
I would imagine that they've felt at least those candidates have gone out there and they've taken it upon themselves to do their study, to be assessed. I would certainly choose somebody like that over someone who's not put themselves out there, because it is scary. It's very scary to actually put yourself in a position where your abilities are being tested. And if you
shows commitment, I think.
Correct, absolutely. And that's what you want to have. And it's not an easy field. Horses are not easy. Getting up early in the morning and dealing with horses is not easy every single day.
Dealing with horse people, even the horses are fine. It's the horse people who are the worst. You need to add a psychology module. No, I'm joking.
It's true.
Really. Yeah.
Oh goodness.
And going on, obviously, so this does elevate a candidate as soon as they've got these great results. It shows commitment. It shows they've got real tangible education. Do these qualifications also open doors internationally for South Africans going abroad?
Definitely.
Especially the IGEQ passport.
Yes. So once you've got to that level, for sure.
Okay.
Then you've got the doors that'll open. But even the lower modules, we've even had from the academy, we had one young man who decided he wasn't going to become a jockey after all, but he got his module 1 and 2, and he managed to get a job in China as a stable hand on the strength of his EQASA module 1 and 2.
Lovely.
I love that. And I keep trotting that one out to all my other apprentices when they're going, oh, why do they have to do this?
And as you said, I think it's commitment. It's commitment to the industry, to the horses, to your own education. And I think there's nothing more important with horses than being teachable. Like you said, I've learned something new today. And I think there was a lovely story. I think it was George Iwanovsky, who was on his deathbed at the age of 94. And his family said, Dad, is there anything you regret? And he said, I just wish I'd learned more about horses. And I remember I read that in my 20s and I was suicidal. I thought, this is really, wow. You mean I'm not going to know everything by 25? but horses are. And as you've been saying, especially under the international spotlight, it's an ever-evolving sphere at the moment, and we really need to, so people who are teachable and trainable and committed to being so really are valuable. How does EQASA contribute, speaking of that, to professionalizing the equine industry?
Well, I think if you getting people out there and they wanting to qualify themselves, already you're halfway there to making it more of a professional industry. Because if anybody can just do it, well, it doesn't really professionalize it. So by actually getting a qualification and putting yourself out there and being able to market yourself as a professional, as someone who does have this qualification, I think that makes a big difference.
And I think, having a qualification is qualifications sound lovely. It's education. You have education behind you, which is the value. What are the biggest benefits of the EQASA system for, right? I originally asked you riders and coaches, but I'm going to take it a step further here, and I'm going to say for parents, because I really think that, we're focusing a lot, and we've been talking a lot about development, and we're talking about social license to operate, but really the future of the sport lies in kids. What are the benefits of this for the riders, coaches, people who are going to be trained, and that parents must look out for?
So really the benefit is that somebody who's been through the system will have ticked boxes all the way along. They will have done a safeguarding course. That your child is going to be taught by someone who's been assessed as competent. That their way of teaching is the correct way of teaching, that their way of handling horses, there's education behind it. And when a young person comes along and they're going to be involved with the coach, it's definitely a huge plus to have had that, to be approaching somebody who has that background as opposed to somebody who's not.
And riders, I think also, Troy, they know if there must surely also be a provenance with finding a level 7 coach as opposed to a level 4 coach, a little bit more what you're getting in for.
Yes, absolutely. And it depends on what stage you're at. I mean, there's no point if you're a beginner rider or you're just riding around on your pony is going to find a module 7 coach. There's no point. You want to go to the module 4 or module 5 coach because they are more geared towards you and where you are at that point. And there will be a time when you will outgrow that person and move on to another one because it's a new stage in your learning. So,
you should hopefully, if you've got a good coach, you should hopefully outgrow them.
Correct. And from a coach's perspective, you actually want your student to be better than you are.
Yeah, and what a compliment.
100%.
What are the current limitations or challenges within EQASA for you, Troy?
Okay, so one of the limitations is there are a lot of people out there who aren't show jumpers and dressage riders. So that is a bit of a problem in that maybe they do Western riding, for example.
Okay.
So a lot of it can kind of combine, and they do still jump a few little logs and things like that. So it's not a problem. They would be able to do that. But they specialize slightly differently. In the IGEQ, so far, we focused more on the Olympic disciplines, as have we in EQASA. But we want to now start branching out so that people can come away with a module 5, but not necessarily in the jumping and the dressage.
Okay.
Afterwards, if they can do that and then they branch out, we already have somebody who did tent pegging, and she has got her.
Oh, that's amazing! Yeah, that's so great.
Yeah, she's got her module 7 in tent pegging.
Lovely.
So that's a specialization. So that's definitely one of the things that I think of as maybe a bit of a problem at the moment. Also, particularly for dressage riders, some dressage riders will not go over a pole on the ground. And whether it's nerves or whether they've had an accident before or something like that. So that is a problem for module 5.
Okay.
So what we've done at the moment is that we will give them a certificate, a Module 5 certificate, provided they've taught a group and they've taught the dressage, etc., and they've done everything else. But their certificate will be endorsed. And that would mean that they can't actually get their IGEQ passport.
Okay.
So that is a problem at the moment. It's in discussion.
This needs to make dressage riders braver. What is, okay, but realistically, what is the height that they would have to jump at that level?
So the height has in fact come down.
Okay.
Because at the IGEQ, over the years, we've had this discussion as well, because if you make it too high at level 1, module 5, then you're going to cut out a lot of people. Whereas even on an 80 centimeter track, you can see on an 80 centimeter track what you could see on a 1 meter track. And it's quite different to have a horse that's capable of jumping 1 meter as opposed to one that's jumping 80. So for the people who are only jumping small, it's much more doable. And you can still demonstrate rhythm, line, correct lead, all that kind of thing over an 80 track as opposed to a 1 meter. So in fact, IGEQ has brought their level down to 80.
Okay, I think that's pretty doable then.
It's doable. It's doable for most people. So that does open the door, which I'm delighted about.
Okay.
For a lot of people that, no, I can't jump 90 or I can't jump a meter. And then I mentioned the different Olympic disciplines. Oh, and money, obviously, can be a bit of a challenge for a lot of people. Always. So we do have some bursaries. And also, as you've mentioned, fantastic that SAEF has come to the party for grooms, which is awesome. So at least that gets them started. But then as other people will say, no, it's too expensive. And then I did a little calculation and I realized that you can get your international qualifications, so module 1 to module 5, for the cost of keeping one horse in livery for 2 months. So actually, is it that expensive?
And looking at university, or any online education at the moment, it's become maybe more affordable, but it's not less expensive than that. So what misconceptions do people have about EQASA that you would like to address?
Okay, so one of them is that they think, no, it's just too hard. I can't go there. Or it's only for coaches. Not at all. As we've had during this discussion, not at all. We're looking at everybody. We want everybody to come along and improve their knowledge and for the sake of the horses. So absolutely not only for coaches, it's for anybody involved in horses. Another misconception is that, they're just out to fail you. Not at all. Our examiners are there to pass you, but they are the guardians of the standard. And they obviously have to keep that standard in order to make the qualification worthwhile. If something is too easy and everybody can get it, well, is it worth having?
And I love that phrase you said, guardians of the standard, because you want yards to think that having an EQASA qualified student is a special thing, not that they just paid the money for the exam and got given a certificate. And I do think that needs to be a differentiator. I think it's really important and I think that's perhaps where you're learning, you say that's, where you go to study for these exams and the reading materials that you access, and people need to be good about that. Yeah.
And it's very hands-on. And that's the other thing, because I've had a few people say, oh, well, I've done an online course with somewhere in Australia. Well, that's fine, but can you actually put the boots on correctly with a horse? It's totally different. Ours is such a hands-on sport and an industry rather than sport. It's absolutely hands-on. And that's why all of our assessments, certainly in modules 1 and 2, are hands-on.
That's great. If someone is hesitant but keen to start on the EQASA pathway, what would you say to them?
Go for it. You'll be so glad you did.
I think also you guys sound very approachable. So I think if they have any questions, can they reach out to you via email or via the website?
Email is best.
Okay.
So because we've all got like other jobs. So yeah, so email is definitely best. And we'll obviously get to you as soon as we can if you've got any particular questions.
And what is that email address?
So it's probably best to email me on kzn@sanep.org.za.
Thank you. And then, Troy, where do you hope to see EQASA in the next 5 to 10 years?
Okay, so what I'd love to see is even more provinces coming on board, because I know it's quite difficult for people to travel. So we've already opened up Middelburg. So in Mpumalanga, they don't have to travel all the way to Gauteng now. We've opened up the Eastern Cape in PE. So at least those people don't have to travel all the way to the Western Cape.
Fabulous. Yeah.
And also in the Southern Cape, we're hoping to get George off the ground. Great. So again, there's lots of opportunities there. Plus, all of our, as I don't think you might have noticed that in our name, Equestrian Qualifications Authority of Southern Africa.
Oh. Also,
our neighbors. We've been approached by Zambia, and we're busy getting Zambia going on the whole EQASA scene, and then they'll eventually be like once they've got everybody qualified and they've got examiners, they'll eventually be like a province, which is awesome.
We're going to drop the S out of EQASA eventually, and it'll just be the Equine Qualifications Authority of Africa, hopefully.
Indeed. There's a big horse community in the Congo, I believe.
The lunatics are all over, Troy. They're all over and they all need help.
Yeah, that's true.
What else would you, so you've already mentioned that you would like to see more discipline differentiation as well. You would like more accessibility across provinces. Is there anything else that you're hoping to?
Yes. So when we're talking about disciplines, the other one is tourism. So tourism is a big thing. Okay. And we really want the people who are ride guides, looking after horses, to be qualified as well. So that's another avenue. And in fact, we're busy with that with the IGEQ at the moment.
Okay.
So trying to bring that one into the matrix. So then, and once that's in there, then we'll borrow it.
That's so interesting, and especially because Africa is the big 5 riding destination of the world. So that's interesting to hear. What still needs to change in South Africa's equine education space in general?
So I think it's important that everyone realizes the benefit of education, and right across the board, from start to finish, from every single discipline, that we're all on the same page in terms of our horses. So Pony Club is fabulous, and Pony Club kind of took a bit of a dive. It's now coming back, and I'm so excited about that, because Pony Club is a wonderful starting point for any rider. And they're so hands-on as well.
I was so impressed. I actually visited the Pony Club Irene, I think. No, I'm trying to think. I was at the award ceremony last year, and I was so impressed by the topics that they covered with the kids. Road safety. They had a lecture about that. And then, of course, they do the fun stuff in between. There was a pony dressed up as a ghost. I think it just had a sheet over it with 2 holes cut out for its eyes and its ears. God bless ponies.
It's just so fantastic. These young kids are not on their phones. These young kids are with their ponies having fun.
Preaching to the choir. We have had Emma Sadler on here to speak about how careful people need to be. And it's a podcast I would encourage everybody to watch, about being careful about what you post on social media. But as kids are increasingly moving into that online space younger and younger, and they're exposed to more than ever, I used to say, people said, do you want your child to ride? And I would say, God, no, it would be cheaper and safer for her to do drugs. And now I'm going, no, this is fantastic. They're outside, they're with their friends, they're taking the pony to the shops. It's a really wonderful. So yes, Pony Club is a stepping stone to this, I think, is wonderful. But yes, more education.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. So much more education and fun. And you know, when my kids were young, it was a case of, do you want your children to spend their time in the mall? Nowadays, it's not the mall, it's the phone.
Yeah.
And that is the problem. It's the social media is a huge issue, huge. So no, I want them on their horses, having fun, being silly and being kids.
And learning and being safe.
And learning at the same time.
Wonderful. How can riders, coaches, yard owners, parents, anyone wanting to know more about horses better engage with EQASA?
Look, the best thing obviously is to go onto the website and have a look and see what's offered and see what the whole idea behind it is, and then speak to people about it. Speak to me, speak to others, speak to my other representatives in the various provinces, depending on where you are, and go from there.
Troy, thank you so much for your time today. Is there anything you would like to add further that we haven't covered?
I think we've kind of covered it all.
Even the alphabet.
Even the alphabet soup. But it's an absolute honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I look forward to having you back on here when we've got an update on some of your exciting developments.
Will do. Absolutely.
Great.
Thank you, Georgie.
That was Troy Kernick, the Managing Director of the Equine Qualifications Authority of South Africa, here today on the South African Equestrian Federation's podcast From the Horse's Mouth. For anybody wanting to further their equine education, please get in touch with them. If you Google EQASA, EQASA, it will come up. Otherwise, the website is SANEP, sanep.org.za, and they will be more than happy to encourage you on your equine education journey. And thank you so much for joining us today. Be sure to join us for the next one.